propose or second myself. So
no, you can't.
Can I look to Bob and someone else?
I'll be delighted to propose Rob Middleton.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Super. And do I have a seconder?
I have a second.
Councillor Bowden, thank you. Do I have any further nominations for chairman? No. If I hand the chair over to you then, Councillor Middleton.
I'm grateful, Dawn. Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 2, which is notification of vice chair. The vice chair falls to Cambridgeshire County Council this year. So I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder for a member from CCC.
I would like to propose Councillor Chris Bowden as vice chair.
And unless someone else wants a second, I'm more than happy to second Chris.
I'm happy to second. Are we
Sebastian
using the raise hand facility or not?
I am. Sorry, didn't see that one. So Councillor Chris Bowden is duly elected as the vice chair. So if for some unknown reason I do happen to lose contact with the rest of you via this wonderful new technological advancement that is Zoom, then Chris, if you can jump on in, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Item 3, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Do we have any apologies for absence, Dawn?
No, we don't, Chairman.
And in line with the usual guidance, do we have any declarations of interest? I'll pause for a couple of seconds.
Well, just a matter of propriety, I'll just mention that I'm one of the members of the member board for LGSS Law Limited, since LGSS Law Limited is mentioned in one of our reports.
Thank you. Chris? We have a little bit of feedback at the moment because Steve Richardson sat by my side, so if you happen to hear that, we're just trying to resolve that slight technical difficulty. So I note, Chris, your declaration with respect to LGSS law. Assuming there's nothing else, I'll note there's no apologies for absence and 1 declaration of interest. Now I have item 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting of the 27th of February 2020. We have those minutes at pages 5 to 6 of the papers. I'm assuming everyone's had the opportunity to read those papers and to scrutinise them. Does anyone have any corrections, amendments, or any changes to propose? I don't see any hands raised or physical hands raised, so I'm assuming that I can sign those as a true record at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Moving on to the first substantive item, which is item 5, which is LGSS 2020-21 Budget Monitoring Report. We have a papers at pages 7 to 20. And I believe, Justine, are you taking us through introducing this item?
I am, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to maybe set a little bit of context for this first anyway, we agreed with the 151 officers that we would prepare these reports on the basis of the current budget until such time as we are absolutely totally clear on the consultations wrapped up and everything else in terms of the changes going forward. So the forecasts and everything are based on a full year of this continuing. Obviously, we know that that's unlikely to be a reality, but that's the closest we can get to. So that's the basis on which this has been prepared. And obviously, as we go through the year, we will adapt that to reflect the changes that are happening and change the forecasts accordingly. So just starting with the revenue position as it stood at the end of June, we were looking then at an overall underspend for LGSS 346,000, and that's made up of 859,000 on the shared service across the shared services for LGSS, and offset for Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire by pressures on trading, and those pressures on trading are related to the cessation of the service provision to Norwich, and obviously we had an upside from that, and a reduction in the agreed charges around the council's pension funds. There are council-specific savings that we agreed with the 151s to recognise sort of further down on this table. So we'll look at those as well in a little bit, but that's to do with Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, not Milton Keynes again. And obviously, because the report's prepared on a full year basis, those are, if we carried on as we are, but we know, for instance, that the NCC savings target, part of the remodelling will help to address that as we go forward. Paragraph 6, there's a table that sets out the outturn split between the 3 councils, and you can see that at the moment, even with the pressure on trading, we are looking at a very small underspend for Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, aside from those savings targets, and a bigger underspend for Milton Keynes. So a reasonably healthy position to be in at this stage. Paragraph 7 to 9 are about reserves. We did have a significant balance of reserves because we had a large underspend last year. We had quite a significant balance transferred into LGSS reserves at 31st of March 2020. So on the 1st of April, we had a balance of 2.883 million, of which 1.16 is committed and there's 1.7 that's uncommitted. As part of this paper, we have got requests for some essential IT spend to use a significant part of that, £976,000 of the reserves. And so we'll come to that in a little while because we do need a formal decision on that. Okay, so if we just have a little look at what's driving the underspends at the moment, on the top of page 10, in section 2, you can see the position directorate by directorate. So the finance directorate, there are just some small pressures in financial operations that's related to savings targets, but the 151 officers agreed that we should maintain those savings targets going through into the future. So there's just some slight pressure there, and also on audit, largely as a result of the cessation again of the contract with Norwich, and a lot of the audit costs were recharged to Norwich and the Cambridgeshire team. So there's a bit of a pressure there that's being managed at the moment. HR, we've got a 362,000 forecast underspend. That's largely to do with both learning and development, which underspent quite significantly in 1920. It's got a forecast underspend again of 183,000 this year. Obviously, COVID has had impact on that. In terms of the level of income we get, but also the level of work that we are doing. And much of the rest of the underspend in HR is about the central teams. Obviously, the director of HR is on secondment, so there are some savings from that. He's still supporting LGSS, but not at full cost. And there are other heads of service who are on secondment and posts that are vacant. IT, again, another 372,000 underspend. A lot of that is about business systems, recharging a lot of work, because a lot of their work at the moment is to do with reorganisation in Northamptonshire, and that's paid for in a different way. And then finally, managing director, obviously we've got significant vacancies in the central teams that we've been carrying, awaiting the outcome, the final sort of position for the operating model review. So overall, 859 under, and then, as I said before, on trading, we're 513 over, leaving a net position of 346. If I could just take you to the reserves section, which is Appendix 3, on page 17. In fact, if you go to page, so we look at the reserves position first. So this, the top table shows the 1.7 million that we've brought forward, and shows a proposed transfers from reserves of 976,000. And the detail of that is set out on page 18, and 18 and 19, it relates to 3 main things. So 772,000 is about the backup infrastructure, data backup support for the 3 councils. And there are 2 issues driving this. One, there's capacity issues at the moment in terms of the infrastructure, which creates risks for the councils. And added to this, the support contract expires anyway at the end of January. So we need to do something. And so this is about addressing that and covering the costs up to 2023, which is why it's quite a significant amount of money. In the past, it was paid off as a one-off, so there is no ongoing budget for this. And so that's why it's being asked to be funded from reserves, but obviously taking it through to 2023 resolves current issues and allows time for new arrangements to be finalised and settled in terms of IT structures. The next one is an essential upgrade to the income management system. This is about Civica Pay that we take our income through, and this has to be done. All of these things have been through the 151s. They've all agreed that this is essential spend we can't avoid, and this is just a compliance upgrade that needs to be undertaken. And the third one is just a small £20,000 for internal audit software, which again, they want to upgrade the existing system and move it to cloud provision. So all of those come to 976,000. As I said earlier, we've got 1.717 million in uncommitted reserves at the moment. So taking that off still leaves a significant amount of reserves. And you can see in the reserves table that all the things that we, all the sort of transition costs for the changes that we have been talking about for some months now are all allowed for already in the committed reserve. So that 1.7 million really is uncommitted at the current time. The only other things I wanted to say on the report quickly were just to note that we are no longer reporting in this report the capital position or the managed budget position. Capital, so my team centrally don't support the LGSS budget holders with this. It's all done by the core council's own finance teams. And we've taken the view for this year that what we need to focus on is the LGSS supported budgets as we move through the transition phase to the new model. The capital and the managed budgets are all reported in the council's own individual reports anyway, so it was effectively duplicating it. And so those have been removed from this report for this year. So happy to take any questions, and then Dawn, we need to have a formal decision in terms of those requests for use of reserves.
I see that. Thank you for that, Justine. I see Sebastian's raised his hand.
Thank you very much. The question I had is probably not a very big one, but I would like clarification anyway. On page 11 of the report, there is a paragraph in the middle beginning internal audit and risk. And it then proceeds to say a proportion of the overspend, it can be attributed to 32,000 of pre-agreed internal recharges, and then goes on to say not anticipated by the budget manager in the initial budget setting process. So is that just purely a timing issue?
Sorry, we're on audit, are we?
Yes, so Appendix 1, page 11, bang in the middle of the page.
Sorry, can you just repeat which bit, the wording that you're referring to?
So the paragraph beginning internal audit and risk.
Yeah.
Okay. It then goes on to talk about 32,000 of pre-agreed internal recharges not anticipated by the budget manager. So the question was that a timing issue, or was it an error in the internal audit process?
I think the issue really around internal audit is about their ability to balance their budget following the removal of the Norwich work. And so they had cut their budget to meet their, to meet the funding that they had, but actually they need to pay more for these are to do with finance graduates that they are paid for by the finance department and then recharged. And so the amount that was allowed for in the budget was not enough to meet that. So that team are working hard now to reduce the costs and to make up for the sort of the shortfall that's been left by the Norwich work no longer coming through that team.
Okay, so it's just so what you're saying is it's as a result of the loss of a contract.
Effectively, they had a challenge setting their budget at a reasonable level because of the loss of that contract, and so they made some, they really overall some costs need to come out of that to make up for that loss of income, and this is just a result of that. And perhaps the wording is not necessarily the clearest it might be, but fundamentally it is about losing £100,000 of income or thereabouts from the Norwich contract, and trying to absorb that pressure within the team and make the adjustments they need to get that back down. So obviously they're looking at that. The overspend is 57,000 here. It is reducing as time goes on as they seek other ways to offset that, to reduce cost, or to get more income in to meet that.
But thank you. So how does that relate to part of what we're being asked to agree today, which is the upgrade of the internal audit software? The 20,000 that we're being asked for, would that normally have been within budget and budgeted for, and with officers aware of it coming down the line? And has it been moved into this one-off expenditure for well, to make things easier?
So actually, the expectation was that that upgrade would take place last year. There was the budget for it last year. The internal audit team were something like £150,000 underspent last year, and they were expected to pay through there. So you could say that obviously that underspend then got swept into LGSS reserves, and what they're asking is to take it back out again. They couldn't accrue for it because it wasn't expenditure that they had actually incurred. So the underspend would have been swept up into LGSS reserves, and they're basically asking for that back again. So that's not included as part of the £57,000 forecast on the service at the moment, because it's assumed in these numbers that the reserve approvals go ahead. Obviously, if you were to say no, then we'd have to go back and actually question, I suspect, whether they absolutely had to do that, or how they would fund it otherwise.
Thank you.
I now see that Terry's got his hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, if I may. Paragraph 5, page 9. I'm a little bit concerned. We're looking there at posts being held vacant, difficulty in recruiting, underspend arising from these actions, and then we end up with a final statement that there's an impact on our service delivery. What is the extent of that impact, and will it affect what's likely to happen downstream?
So we haven't. I can't exactly tell you exactly what the impact of that is, but obviously across a lot of, particularly the central services, we are managing with very low levels of staffing, and in some of the services that are moving, we've got vacancies and things that we're carrying, awaiting the outcomes of the review. Obviously, because we're so close to that now, once you put in place those changes, then a lot of these things will be addressed. But at the moment, we are managing, I would say, to deliver the services, but it's not easy, and there are undeniably, I think, things that that we would have done in different ways had we had more capacity. Mark, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so a lot of the vacancies are in the central team, which are obviously impacted by the LGSS review, and therefore going out and recruiting for into posts that would be at risk. Obviously, we wanted to avoid. And then in the service areas, until those services get repatriated to the home councils, we have to be conscious of what was built into the model in respect of savings targets there as well. I'm not aware across the patch where service has been impacted by this. You might then well say, well, when these services get repatriated, hopefully they will continue to operate with these vacancies because the service is being delivered. But we need to understand as well, by breaking up LGSS, some of the economies of scale that were that came together by having a shared functions, there will be diseconomies of scale as they go back to their host council. So I think there will be a bit of work to continue to look at whether those vacancies can be held. And we've always carried vacancies throughout, all councils do, but particularly LGSS. If you look through the last, 5-10 years, we've always had, churn of staff and vacancy factor, and hopefully service has not been impacted significantly by that.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Mark, for the follow-up. Much appreciated. It just worried me. In fact, COVID-19 obviously has had a knock-on effect with our staff already. And if we're putting more pressure on them, there comes a breaking point at some stage, but hopefully that will be addressed. Could I turn to page 17 and the reserves and opening balance on that particular page? I think that should read 1st of April 2019, or am I being presumptive?
Sorry, it should say closing balance 31st of March 2021. So it's 1st of April 2020.
Well, one of them was wrong. That's what worried me.
It's the closing one that's wrong. Yes, sorry about that.
One. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. That just slightly perturbed it. That's only a small point, but thank you for that one. Thank you, Chair.
Chris, I see you raise your hand.
Thank you, Rob. My apologies, I've got some connection difficulties, so if I freeze during this, my apologies. I was concerned about the utilisation of non-earmarked reserves and the extent to which this is happening. And I particularly was concerned when I looked at what is being proposed today to see that there are items within that which should have been anticipated in the budget. For example, the fact that our existing support contract for disaster recovery solution expires at the end of January 2021. Apologies about that. The fact that the disaster recovery solution expires at the end of January 2021 should surely have been included in the budget for this year. And given that there are 3 items in the proposed utilisation of this year's of the uncommitted reserves, all of which are IT items, I just wonder whether we are being over optimistic in terms of what IT costs we are going to be incurring, because I accept that these are all one-offs, but all of them are one-offs, it seems, and it's a recurring feature. Not merely it has to be set in LGSS, but in many other local government organisations as well. So is it some concern that we're being asked to transfer 976,000, of which I do appreciate that 556,000 is 2021, 2 and beyond?
Mark, I see you indicating to respond.
Yes, specifically on that DR point, Councillor Bowden, it's the so the storage area network, the SAN. 5 years ago, Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire, and Milton Keynes bought 2 storage area networks. One is housed in Northampton and one in Cambridgeshire, and basically they back each other's data up and provide that security that the data is maintained off-site from the location where the primary data centre is. When that deal was done, and it predates me, but when that deal was done 5 years ago, it upfront was paid for the maintenance and support of the storage area network, and I believe it may have been capitalised at the time as a single charge 5 years ago. So what's happened is the 5 years comes to an end in January 21, and therefore there was never any budget within LGSS in the IT workplace to pay for the ongoing support beyond that point. During that time, obviously technology has moved on, and the amount of data that all 3 councils are backing up has increased significantly. So there was a technical issue where when the team were running backups at the end of the day, it was taking too long to complete the backup in order before business started the following day. So there was a need to increase the capacity on those 2 storage area networks to future-proof it. And secondly, we needed to address the ongoing support beyond February 21. So working with Dell, the heads of IT have come up with this. There's improved backup systems in place. There's a bit more investment in the tin and the technology to future-proof it, and we've got support through to 2023. And the timing of that was akin to the discussion that's taken on through the LGSS review about the 3 councils would decide through that period what their longer term IT strategy would be. Obviously, Cambridgeshire working more closely with Peterborough, the 2 new unitaries being formed in Northamptonshire, and Milton Keynes taking a view as to what their future would be. So, but to answer your question, no, there was never a budget for the ongoing maintenance of those storage area networks because it was paid for upfront 5 years ago. And I'm afraid I can't tell you what happened before that as to what was in its place and where the budget was for that.
Chairman, if I may, it didn't quite answer my question because it would have been anticipated, it would have been known that the DR solution expired at the end of January 21. So it must have been known when we were setting the budget for 2021 that there would be some expenditure here. And I imagine the capacity issues probably would have been known at the budget setting time as well. So my question is my question isn't what wasn't in the budgets in previous years, but why, when setting the budget for this year, wasn't that, for example, anticipated and included? And given
Well, my answer would be, and I think it may be one of the 151s that needs to step in here, the LGSS budgets just tend to roll forward year to year. It's not a zero-based budgeting process. So therefore, I'm not sure that the budget was gone through in such detail as to add that amount of money into the LGSS budget.
I'm sorry, I only heard part of the answer, but maybe I heard the important part. It still concerns me that we do have potentially an issue where we are failing to anticipate IT costs which are able to be anticipated. And I just wanted to, LGSS is hardly unique in that respect, I have to say, but given that all 3 of the requests that we have for further utilization of this year's reserves from the non-committed reserves are IT items, I thought it was worthwhile highlighting this and also seeking some recognition that maybe we need to look forward slightly better in future than we have done in this particular case.
Thank you, Chris, for that. I think everyone accepts your point that it seems as if, not sure if I'd use the word oversight, but potentially there's something of that sort. I think that whilst you were away, Mark wanted to try to hand this question off to one of the Section 151 officers, but I don't see at this time a Section 151 officer or a deputy indicating. So it seems this is one which needs to be taken away and responded to in writing. Lizzie, were you indicating?
Yeah, I was. Well, I've been trying to anyway. So given the 976 for the disaster recovery solutions, etc. in IT, that's quite a significant sum of the reserves. So that leaves less than £1 million in those reserves. What is considered, I know there isn't probably a legal definition, but what is considered a safe amount to have in those reserves versus the operating costs annually?
Shall I answer that one, Rob? I think given that we're about to change the model anyway, I've taken a paper through the 151s in terms of what happens to these reserves. Each of the councils has their own reserves, and LGSS reserves, we don't really have such a significant amount of money. In the early days of LGSS, any surplus that was made was given back to the councils. In more recent years, we have set aside that money for investment into future services for LGSS. So there's never really been a sort of level that we would want in LGSS because each of the councils has their own reserves for any future spend that comes through. So the intention at the moment is whatever is there, we either spend it on LGSS services, or once we move through to the new model of provision for LGSS services, it will be distributed back to the 3 partner councils.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'll do now is just pause for a few more seconds just to see if anyone else wants to raise their hand or wants to physically wave at me. Okay, I see no other member indicating. We've got 2 actions as they're described on page 7. The first is to note the position, which I think we've done duly. And then there's also the second, which is to approve the use of LGSS uncommitted reserves to fund essential IT upgrades at a total cost of £976,000. Justine's discussed this, and we've had a number of questions relating to that, which is sought to critique and comment and to elicit some further detail. I need to move this formally now. So I'm going to assume that this is going to be unanimous approval of this, unless I see any hands, physical hands, that you're going to not support it. I don't see anyone, so I'm assuming unanimous support. Thank you. So the next item that we have now is item 6, which is the ERP updates. We've had a paper which has been distributed separately, which I hope that everyone's had an opportunity to read and has made it to them. Can I invite someone to introduce this item? I don't know if that'd be Peter or Mark.
It's me, Rob.
Mark.
Okay, so this paper sort of in two parts: what was delivered in 1920 and a view of what's on our plate now in 2021. So if I were to take you through, I think, paragraph 2 with the deliverables in 1920, just as some of the things that were the team had to work on. ERP Gold, when we built it, is replicated in both data centres in Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, and there are interfaces that through a product called BizTalk that provides the interfaces into those systems. We tested the DR system for ERP Gold. We did not complete the test successfully for a number of reasons. The main reason being that at the same time there had been and was ongoing work with moving the network across to what I call MLL, the wide area network, and also changes to the network in preparation for the Shire Hall data center move. Some of those changes meant that we were able to fail over ERP into the data center, but people in the offices were not able to access it to test because the links had been changed. We took the view that because we're so close to moving to the cloud, that we would undertake the test when that takes place in November, given the workload of the team at the time. We've moved again in 1920, making tax digital. The team have been working on that and implemented it and completed it. There's been an upgrade to the version of ERP to 6.5 and obviously the year-end payroll patch. And we've implemented and about to go live with a contract register, another module within ERP. And a big piece of work was P&D's, payment and deductions, is the ability to do back pay calculations. Ever since we went live, this module within Unit 4's Aggresso has never worked, and the team have been working tirelessly to get it so that it does work. And we've now got a system that removes a lot of manual workarounds. And as I say, that was a pretty tough piece of work to crack. Off-network access, again, the ability that if you're not a Cambridge, Milton Keynes or Northamptonshire employee with an email address, accessing the system, whether you're from a school, was difficult. We've now provided that off-network access. We've tested it. But again, it's not complete because we need to rebuild some of the HR forms, e-forms that link into ERP. So quite a lot happened in 1920 to get that through. But the more important and big aspect at the moment is what we've got to achieve in 2021. As you know, with Northamptonshire and the LGR and the decision of the 2 new unitaries to use ERP going forward, the decision to move onto that platform was not made until sort of February this year, which does mean that the timescales for successful implementing this are tight, but the team are up to the task and we're on with it. So we're in the process of building the 2 unitary councils. What that's involved in that is client 10, which is the current NCC client within ERP. We're going to split and create a north and a west instance. and that obviously means migrating the data from the current NCC instance into that, splitting it and putting it in the right place. And then in addition to that, there's obviously the districts and boroughs where we need to take all their data and migrate it across. We had a call yesterday, and actually there's 16 systems that we're legacy systems that we're going to have to migrate data from, because not all of the districts and boroughs have an integrated ERP system. Some of them have separate ERP, a separate finance and HR pay, and some of them separate HR and pay systems. So there's quite a lot of work there. The team are on that now and are working tirelessly to achieve that. It is a big program, and there's a lot of challenges from getting the data out of lots of disparate systems that reside within the districts and boroughs. Before that happens, as you're aware, we're moving ERP into the cloud. So we're moving it from an on-premise solution that's housed in Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire and putting it into a cloud solution. We need to do that as well because of the unitaries, because all the unitary council, the two unitary councils, and particularly the locations who will be accessing it from the 1st of April, the cloud migration is pretty critical. At the same time as the cloud migration, we're upgrading to the next version of ERP, of Aggresso's Unit 4 Business World. Just to be clear, it's not the very, very latest, because obviously we wouldn't do that. We want to make sure that there's, you know, a module that's been out there and tested before we move to it. So we're moving to cloud and an upgrade to 7.6, and that will go live with effect from November this year. So quite a lot on. And then at the same time, and a subject of great debate, Northamptonshire is creating a children's trust, and the Children's Trust are taking ERP Gold. The only available time slot to move the Children's Trust onto ERP Gold is for them to go live at the same time as the cloud migration and upgrade to 7.6, so that we can do the testing and all the things that are necessary for that data migration at the same time. And that's due to go live again on the 1st of November. Following that, then in parallel, there's all the work going on about the future Northants ERP program. And there's, as I say, this is a very complex and large-scale program. The team are already working pretty long hours to achieve this. But again, subject to us being able to get the data in a timely fashion and to the right quality, I'm confident that we have a good chance of achieving the 1st of April go live day with all the districts and boroughs duly onboarded. Another thing that we need to do is, at the moment, the mileage and expenses for Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, you go into the mileage and expenses to submit your mileage and expense claims through a product called OutSystems, which the contract is due to expire. OutSystems have significantly increased the cost model for the way they charge going forward. So as a consequence, we're going to move mileage and expenses into the ERP solution, which is currently what Milton Keynes use anyway, but it will be the solution that Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire will have to use going forward. Once we get past the 1st of April, there are mobile apps within Unit 4's Business World for mileage and expenses, which I think will be on the roadmap of things that we need to consider implementing post-April, or looking at post-April. And I think that's about it. They're the key things in the ERP world. Any questions?
Thanks, Mark. I do have someone indicating, but before I bring in Bob, I think, first of all, just as chair, just to note that you made repeated reference throughout your introduction to the long hours theme. So I think it's just worth noting as a board that I think you're indicating there that some people are really having to stretch every sinew to make these things work. I think for the purposes of the record, and given that this is live on YouTube, it's probably just worth noting as well, top of page 4, that this proposal has been through the board, and the board did express their disappointment. So I think it's just worth noting that. And also, just there's a sentence there: the decision was made by the Business Systems Board not to complete another test and accepted the associated risks. So I think the board is indicating to the joint committee there that they're aware that there is disappointment around this, that there are risks, but they're acceptable. I suppose the question I have before I bring others in, Mark, is you do have a lot of things on the anvil at the moment, and in particular, a lot of things going on in Northamptonshire, including the Children's Trust, which, as you say, is going to go live at the time of the cloud transfer. Do you have enough people? You know, I'm trying to sort of horizon scan here. Are you going to be able to deliver all this on time?
So we had as Barry knows, we had a call yesterday with the Children's Trust and people from various, the commissioners and people from Department for Education. The analogy I used prior to that meeting about bringing in resource, this is not around throwing resources at it. And my analogy is, if you had 10 mechanics working on your car engine at the same time, it's highly likely that when you drove out of the garage, one of them might have done something that somebody previously had fixed at the same time. So this isn't about resource. This is around, and the other descriptions, it's like a funnel that as you start shoving things in at the wide end, it narrows down. So as we start to load files and migrate data, we can only load them sequentially. So you couldn't run 20 or 30 files in parallel. They have to go in sequentially. And therefore it's about enough hours in the day, enough days in the week, and enough weeks left to go live. So it's not necessarily around resources. Peter's team and the Future Northants programme have certainly been very accommodating if we've identified additional resources. We have a couple of key resources that have just recently been identified with significant health issues, and therefore we're trying to backfill in the event that they may go off on longer term sick. So I think, you know, that we are trying to manage that, but as I say, it's the length of time we've got to do these things. I think the thing that will really challenge us in respect of the Future Northants programme is whether the districts and boroughs can provide the data to us in a timely fashion and to the data quality, because I think that'll be the test as to, because I think what we found on the original ERP programme, those of us that were around then, that we kept, if we missed a deadline, we tried to push it back and think we could catch it up. And I think you'll remember that that was not necessarily achievable. And that'll be the big risk on this programme now, is that if we don't get the data from the districts and boroughs at the time that we need it, and if it's not complete, it will be a risk. And we've got checkpoints, and we'll say, you haven't done it on time, we've missed the boat, what are the alternatives?
So just indulging the fact that I am chair, and apologise to others who have indicated, and not wishing to be too cruel, Mark, but if, for example, the districts don't provide the data in a timely fashion, just let's taking that as an example, what's the plan B? I'm just conscious that LGSS and this joint committee wants to make sure that, you know, if data hasn't been provided in a timely fashion, that responsibility for that is attributed to the right place. I don't want, you know, I appreciate that LGSS is coming towards its sort of some of its retirement years, but I wouldn't want LGSS to be badged with responsibility for, you know, failings elsewhere. So is there a plan B?
So the plan B, we've got checkpoints through to September to see whether we have had the data and we have got the quality and it's been given to us in a timely fashion. The alternatives will be that we will say to the districts and boroughs that you will need to continue to operate your legacy systems post the 1st of April until such time as they can be taken on board onto ERP. Now, as Barry knows, that has far-reaching consequences, because it then means we're going to have an ERP system that will have some of the districts and boroughs on and the county council split, and we'll have data in some of the legacy systems. And therefore, you know, if one of the boroughs having to run their legacy payroll system, somebody therefore has got to reconcile, you know, how you bring those numbers into a single version of the truth in ERP. So the consequences of not doing it and the manual workarounds are not insignificant, which is why we're doing our damnedest to make sure we try and achieve it. But the backstop will be, sorry, you failed. You need to make appropriate arrangements to continue to operate your payroll system, pay your staff, and then we'll have to find somewhere doing a cost file to get the information into ERP. So at least we've got a single version of the truth in the general ledger.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your candor, which has been broadcast live globally on YouTube. So you do have a formal record of what you've said there, which I think will be useful in coming months. I've got Bob, and then I'll have Malcolm. So Bob first.
Thank you, Chair. The points I was going to raise have really been covered by Mark in outlining the position, because, and the reason I put my hand up is I'm well aware of what happened when we put in the system. I'm well aware that the problems we had with the quality of data and the time it took to get that up to the mark. I notice in this paper, as which was in the previous papers on the IT systems when we migrated data, was the pass mark that was acceptable, and that isn't included in this. So perhaps Mark could give us an indication of what is going to be acceptable in data terms and what's not. Thank you.
So Bob, the critical data, when we've done an assessment of migrating the data, the critical areas are obviously HR pay, and the other systems, APAR, we're less concerned about. In fact, for the districts and boroughs, we're going to have an approach on AP. When we look at the volumes of invoices that go through the districts and boroughs, they're not huge. So we're suggesting and recommending that we pay off those invoices leading up to go live, so that we don't have to migrate them. So in some respects, we control that aspect. In respect of AR, again, it's pretty clear as to which one of the mistakes we made in the original ERP was when we brought AR invoices across, we brought across the detail. So if an invoice for £500 was outstanding, or a balance, and it was made up of a £1,000 invoice and a £500 credit note, we brought all that information, all that detail across, and that created massive problems in respect to data migration. If you think back to the Oracle systems that we were bringing across, well, we're not going to do that now. We've been very clear. We will bring across the balance. So therefore, we're going to simplify, because we learned lessons from the previous ERP as to what the things that created problems for us. The payroll thing, HR pay, is the most complex area. And again, we're taking a view there that HR records, like, somebody's diversity, it's not critical that we get that into ERP on day one, because there'll be legacy systems and it might be a filing cabinet with a file that's got that in. The most important thing for day one is that we can pay people. Therefore, we're going to concentrate on collecting the data that we need in order to calculate somebody's pay accurately and hence pay them. So again, we're trying to restrict that volume so that we don't end up with doing things that we don't need to do. That's not to say that we won't do it after the 1st of April, but this is to try and get as much certainty and de-risk as much as possible the amount of work we've got to do between now and next April. The testing, we're not advocating, if you remember back to the payroll parallel run, I can't remember what the percentages were. I don't think we're advocating softening any of those targets. They will be the same as they were when we went live originally with ERP. I think the one risk that we have got is we have not got enough time to do as many payroll parallel runs as we had when we did the original system. But then I would also point out to you, we're not rebuilding the payroll system. It's a data migration. We're not building a brand new system from scratch. They're taking a system that's been running for 2.5 years now, and therefore what we're really testing is the data integrity, that what we take from the districts and boroughs is what then appears in ERP when we reconcile it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Malcolm, and after that is Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mark, what you've got here is a major project with a very short space of time. Now, I've got insufficient scars on my back from IT programs over my history to know that this is fraught, I would say. And a meeting on Zoom today wouldn't give me sufficient confidence to go around and say, yeah, it's going to happen. You've got a project director on this, I'm taking it. Would you have? Mark, can you hear me? No. Can you hear me, Mark?
Mark seems to have frozen.
Yeah. Well, I'll go on for the rest of you. My view is to get a confidence level that this is not going to go wrong. That I'd want to see the program and particularly put forward by the program director, if that isn't Mark, which might well be. It's just asking for trouble. This is, in my view.
Mark, are you back with us? It appears not. So
good illustration what can go wrong with IT, by the way.
Yeah. So I've noted your question, Malcolm, and when Mark reappears from wherever he happens to have gone to, then I'll bring him back in. I think I then had Chris next. Chris.
Thank you, Rob. I'll just take my video down, if you don't mind, just to try and make sure I can ask my question. I share many of Malcolm's concerns. There's an awful lot going on here in the space of 7 months. Cloud migration, ERP upgrade, the split or disaggregation of Northants, the onboarding of all the districts and the boroughs, and the Children's Trust work. There's an awful lot of things in there. And I very much took on board Mark's comment about many of these things have to be done sequentially rather than in parallel. Fully understand that, but that just adds to the difficulty rather than subtracts from it in some respects. What I think is vitally important is that this 1st of April deadline for go live is not extended, and that where I believe the greatest risk that we've got is that one or more districts or boroughs will not be able to provide the data which is required on time and in the format that is required. And I think that we have to be absolutely ruthless about saying to those districts and boroughs which fail that they will have to carry on with their legacy systems after the 1st of April. Because if we start trying to accommodate them when they fail to produce the information which is required on time, it risks making a very difficult project absolutely impossible. So I really think that we have to be quite ruthless about ensuring this 1st of April go live takes place. And if it can't take place with every single district and borough on board, then so be it. And I do share Malcolm's concern also. I think we need greater visibility about the Sorry, I was just saying we need greater visibility about the progress of the whole change. I had some concerns about the 9-month ERP goal development freeze, but given everything else that's going on, I do understand why we have to have a development freeze. However, there comes a time when if a development freeze continues to be extended, it actually harms the work of everything else that is being done in the 3 councils in ERP. So that development freeze can't continue forever, but I do understand why we've got a 9-month development freeze. However unwelcome that may be, it does de-risk the situation very slightly at least.
Mark, I'm assuming you're still not with us. Okay, I have just had Mark on the phone. He says he's trying to log back in. In the meanwhile, can I bring Sebastian to make his point, please?
I'm not sure that I was next in the order, but anyway, I shall plug on. We talk about our partner organisations failing to make the date, but I would just like to hear a little bit more about what happens if we fail to make the date.
Can I respond, Chair? Would that be appropriate?
All right, yes, of course. That'd be very helpful.
Okay. I think we are in very strange circumstances here, trying to implement a Children's Trust and LGR in the middle of a global pandemic. So there's there's no precedent for what we're trying to do. And because one is driven by ministerial direction and the other by Act of Parliament, we have very little choice in delivery. So in the hierarchy of things, I would say that LGR probably takes precedent because it's an Act of Parliament rather than a ministerial direction. And I would say that we have no choice but to go live on 1st of April because that's what that Act of Parliament says. If we don't go live on 1st of April, then we don't go live at all. So it is very high risk. I know it's been managed very tightly, and Mark is the programme director and he's doing an excellent job. And at the moment, all of the programme is rated amber and green. But within that high risk framework that we've been talking about. So I think from the Northamptonshire point of view, we are managing the risk of a district and boroughs, and we have got interim Section 151 officers and interim statutory officers for both the West and the North, shadow authorities who can coordinate the district and borough effort on behalf of the county council's behalf as well. But I'm not trying to play down the risk, but in many respects, we have very little choice in the matter.
Sebastian, do you have you want to follow up on the question you've just asked?
Well, I mean, I understand the position we find ourselves in, but I'm not entirely sure that my concerns don't stand much as with Councillor Bowden's.
Thank you. So I see that Mark's reappeared. So just housekeeping before I go back to Mark. Can I ask that Bob, Malcolm and Sebastian lower their hands, please? I'm not able to do that myself. Mark, it's difficult for me to summarise what other members have said, but I think there was Malcolm, forgive me if I summarise your comments incorrectly. Malcolm was suggesting that he wanted to see the programme timetable and details itself. And asked who was the programme director. So Mark, I think the general thrust of what Malcolm was saying was that we need more assurance, and at the moment Malcolm feels as if we don't have enough assurance around it. Do you want to comment on that, Mark?
So there is a programme plan. The programme manager within the ERP workstream is a guy called Sean Fennings, who works for Peter Borley-Cox. There is a detailed programme of activity of what we need to do and the timescales by which we need to achieve it. I think at the bottom, maybe not in this, there is a programme plan, so I'm happy to share it and circulate it if that's what members would like to see.
Malcolm, can I bring you back in at that point?
Yeah, what I would normally do in a thing like this, Chair, is to have the programme director or manager, whoever's running the programme, present the programme, and from that you can get a really good feel for whether the guy's got a real handle on it or not. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for just for the programmes coming out. But just an email with that on wouldn't do it for me. I'd want to sort of, you look him in the eye, is he going to make it or isn't he? You know, the sort of situation. And it just feels woolly for me at the moment. I'm sure more.
Well, certainly, Malcolm, it's not woolly. Sorry, it's not woolly.
I'm not trying to be rude, Mark, on this. I'm just saying I'm not getting that strong feeling that it absolutely will happen. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I can't say it absolutely will happen. So I think we just need to go back and look at a little bit of history here. Future Northants took the decision to take ERP in February, and we've been speaking to them for a year, going back to last September, actually, as to when we put forward ERP as a solution for Future Northants. A decision to take ERP has been taken late. And now the team, the business systems team within Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire, are trying to meet the timescales of the 1st of April. So if you looked at it and compared it with a programme plan of a normal ERP implementation, you'd say this looks tight, aggressive, and with risk. And you'd be absolutely right. There's just been a LGA peer review of the Future Northants programme, of which ERP was one of the programmes in the ICT workstream that was looked at. Again, they were happy with the progress we were making, but also accepted the risk that we highlighted that we faced in getting this across the line for the 1st of April. And the biggest risk, and I'll say it again, is the districts and boroughs and all their disparate systems being able to present the data that we need in a timely fashion to migrate the data for a go live on an ERP system for the 1st of April. For example, 4 of the districts and boroughs have an outsourced payroll provider that we have to get the information from and into the ERP system. So yes, it is risky. I'm not going to sit here now and say this is a smooth ride through to the 1st of April. There is risk, and if we miss any of the deadlines, the risk increases.
So that seems to be a segue into Chris's point, which if you could just try to summarise. I'm conscious we've got 58 minutes of this meeting left and we've still got 2 items. So Chris, can I bring you in?
Just to summarise then, because I think you went off, Mark, that all sorts of things have to happen here. It makes it very, very difficult. I fully accept your comments about things having to happen sequentially. And that makes it absolutely vital that if any of the districts and boroughs fail to provide the correct information at the correct time in the correct format which works, then we must be ruthless about saying to them, sorry, you've missed the deadline, you're going to have to carry on with your legacy system. We mustn't be over-accommodating here, because we're already right up against it in a very, very challenging programme. And if we try to be over-accommodating, the danger is the whole thing will fail and we'll fail to do what we need to do. I do share Malcolm's concern about the fact that this isn't criticism of you, Mark, far from it from what you've done. It's we as members don't have sight of what the situation is. And I think that we as members would like greater sight of what the situation is and how the programme is developing, and the ability to ask questions about it. I, for example, would ask questions about the challenge we've got with the 31st of March cut-off and the 5th of April PAYE year end, especially given that you've got the Easter weekend coming between those times. So there are detailed questions I think that we'd like to be able to ask to be able to assure ourselves that things are going on track. But the point I was particularly trying to make is I think we've got to be ruthless about saying to the boroughs and districts, sorry, carry on with your legacy systems if you don't give us what we need when we need it.
Right, Mark, I think you understand the situation. Chris, can I ask you to lower your hand, please? Are there any other members who wish to come in at that point before I summarise where I think we are? No. So I think summarising where we are is that there's general concern. I think that's probably the most diplomatic way to put this, which in fairness, Mark is echoed in diplomatic terms. And I think Barry also went and sort of channeled that in his very diplomatic terms as well. I think what would probably be helpful is that we've got one recommendation on this item 6, is if we had a second recommendation which notes the joint committee's concern and invites Mark and the Section 151 officers to consider how the joint committee can be updated more regularly or in a timely fashion, or have an opportunity to scrutinise, something of that sort. So unless I see anyone raise their hand or indicate to me physically, I'm going to assume that there's unanimous support for a second recommendation. I'm just going to pause for a second. And that there's unanimous support for that recommendation to be agreed between myself and the Vice Chair afterwards, but along the lines of what I've just highlighted. I'm just going to pause for a second to have a look to see if anyone wants to gainsay that. I don't see anything. So at that point, I'm going to ask that we agree those 2 recommendations formally, unless anyone wishes to indicate their dissent. No, so that's unanimous support, Dawn, for those for recommendation 1 and that new recommendation 2. I'm conscious now, as the timekeeper, that we've got 55 minutes left. So I'm just going to ask everyone to be as timely as possible. We're now going to move on to the next item, which is the exciting exclusion of the press and the public. We don't have any, but I believe that I need to read this paragraph just to ensure that these items become exempt material. So I'm just going to quickly read this paragraph now. To resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the agenda contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed, information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. I'm assuming that we unanimously agree that recommendation. I don't see anyone indicating. Agreed. At this point, we can move on to our substantive item, item 8,